takes about 10 seconds.
Great. Welcome everyone, to those of you joining on our Zoom and to those of you tuning in on Facebook. I'm very excited about today's Pennsylvania Meet the Candidate event with those running for the U.S. Senate seat in Pennsylvania. So again, a very warm welcome to everyone joining us around the world. And to those of you who may be celebrating the first day of Ramadan, may you have a very blessed month ahead of you. My name is Candace Karistan, and it is my honor to serve Democrats Abroad as its international chair. For those of you who might not be as familiar with us, Democrats Abroad is the largest organization of US citizens living outside of the United States. And we are also an official arm of the Democratic Party. So at our core as an organization, it's our mission to provide Americans abroad a voice in our government and to elect Democratic candidates by getting out that overseas vote. And that is really what we are here to do today for Pennsylvania. So I'm a Pennsylvanian myself. I vote in the 13th Congressional District in the middle of nowhere out of Huntington County, born and raised. And I just wanted to take a moment because I truly cannot overstate the importance of Democrats Abroad and the work that we do, and really what that has meant for our great Commonwealth, our country, and most importantly, our democracy as a whole in the United States. So flashback to 2016. I know many of us don't want to, but this is just a really empowering statistic. If you look again at what our organization has done and is going to do again in 2022. So in 2016, Democrats lost the presidency by a total of 77,000 votes divided between Michigan, Wisconsin, and none other than Pennsylvania. So 77,000 votes. In 2020, as you all know, we really turned this around, and that was in no small part thanks to overseas voters like you showing up like never before. The votes from abroad were the margin of victory in the tightest of races, including in battleground states of Arizona and Georgia. The overseas vote really was what put Biden and Harris over the margin of victory in those two states. And I do not say this lightly, but if overseas voters had not shown up in 2020, all of us could have been looking at a very, very different outcome, a very different political landscape in the United States. And to be very frank, we all know that that outcome and landscape would have been one that rewarded hate, misinformation, authoritarianism. And so I'm here today to thank you for showing up in 2020, but I'm also here to say that we really need to approach 2022 as if it were a presidential election year. We need to be coming at this with the same vim and vigor that we did then, because there is so much on the ballot this year. We all know that. If you have not done so already, please go to votefromabroad.org. Again, that is votefromabroad.org to request your ballot. You will get it for the upcoming primary election in Pennsylvania, and you will also get that for the general election this November, so when the Democrat goes up against the Republican. At present, there are approximately 36,000 Pennsylvanians registered as overseas voters. We as Democrats Abroad and all of us on this call, we need to make sure that those voters not only show up, but that we grow that base. There are more of us overseas, we need to find them. So I'm here with another ask, and that is to really brainstorm, who else do you know? Who can you help vote from abroad? Who can you share today's recording with? This person-to-person interaction that we have as Americans living overseas, just given the nature, again, of our geographic breadth, is so important. And a lot of it is going to come from the personal connections that you have. So maybe that was your roommate at Penn State or someone you worked with in Pittsburgh who is now living overseas. And if you know them, please make sure, again, that Vote from Abroad gets to them. So a few quick last words, again, about today's event and Democrats Abroad's work more broadly. As we entered 2022, we're really set out to bring the elections and the issues closer to you. And that is where this idea of, again, these state teams, which is a new element to Democrats Abroad, comes in. We really want to make sure, again, that you as voters know who and what is on the ballot. and also so that the people in office stateside really understand the issues that are unique to you and to their overseas constituents more broadly. So in this vein, I'd like to thank our Pennsylvania state team for not just organizing today's event, but for really getting off the ground and putting so much energy into really rallying around that hometown pride and being there for our Pennsylvania voters abroad. Thank you to the Pennsylvania state team. I'd also like to thank all of our caucuses and task forces participating in today's event, and of course to you, our attendees, for taking time out of your Saturday to make an informed decision ahead of that May 27th or May 17th Democratic primary election in Pennsylvania. We are also going to feature, as you know, 4 outstanding Pennsylvania Democrats who are running in this primary, and I'd also like to extend my gratitude to each and every one of them for joining. Please note that Democrats Abroad has not endorsed any candidates and is committed to remaining neutral for the duration of the primary. All candidates who filed and will be on the ballot were invited to attend today's event. So final words from me, we are really looking forward to do all that we can to get out the vote from abroad, to get candidates elected with your help. And after this primary, we are going to do all that we can to support the Pennsylvania Democrats and flip that US Senate seat, keep the governorship, and send many more Democrats to the US House of Representatives from Pennsylvania. So again, get your ballot, please votefromabroad.org. And with that, I am going to pass it off to Kimberly Johnson, who's going to say a little bit more about Pennsylvanians Abroad. Kimberly?
Thank you so much, Candace. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for introducing us. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Pennsylvanians Abroad Meet the Primary Candidates panel. Thank you for joining us. I know that we're all excited to hear from these candidates for the Democratic nomination to Pennsylvania's U.S. Senate race. Like Candace said, my name is Kimberly Johnson. I'm a former Scranton resident, now working on the PA state team. Pennsylvania isn't just our home for our team. It's a very important swing state. This midterm election democracy as we know it is on the ballot. And as Candace already mentioned, flipping a US Senate seat this year would make a huge difference to our lives as Americans living abroad. Our Pennsylvania state team is focused on reaching out to and supporting Pennsylvania voters so that we can help make this happen. In the 2020 election, over 30,000 Pennsylvanians cast their votes from abroad. We know that in a close race, of which we see many in the battleground state of Pennsylvania, this number can be the margin of victory. This year, that margin of victory could determine who occupies the governor's residence, the attorney general's office, a US Senate seat, and several competitive House districts. The PA state team is working hard to ensure that Pennsylvanians abroad can make their voices heard in these critically important races. Our team is developing voter support resources specifically for overseas Pennsylvania voters. We want to make sure that you all know all of the important PA details and deadlines at a glance. Our team also wants to ensure that if you encounter an obstacle in registering to vote, in requesting or casting your ballot, that you have support that is easy to reach and expert assistance that can help you resolve any issue. And if you are interested in helping with these efforts, which please be interested. Regardless of whether or not you are a PA voter yourself, we would love for you to join us at one of our planning meetings or one of our volunteer events. If you can only assist us as an ally, please tell all of the Americans that you know about the work that we do. Please repost our social media to your accounts and amplify the call to voters during this midterm election cycle. Please reach out to us via email. Our email address is pa@democratsabroad.org. That's pa@democratsabroad.org for more information or for any questions. And follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Pennsylvanians Abroad. And one quick note before I turn it over to my teammate. Currently, some Pennsylvania voters who have selected intend to return when registering or requesting their ballot may experience delays in receiving their absentee overseas ballots. This comes as a result of extended deadlines to file for state, House, and Senate races. If you have not yet received your ballot, we're currently recommending that you contact your local county elections office, or if you want to reach out to us at pa@democratsabroad.org. We can definitely help you with any questions and provide more information for you. So thanks again for joining us. And I will now hand it over to my fellow PA state team member, Carl Taylor, to introduce our first candidate, Congressman Connor Lamb. Carl?
Hello, everyone. I'm Carl Taylor, veteran, Philadelphia native, and resident of Frankfurt, Germany, and I'm part of the Democrats Abroad group, their vice chapter chair. It is my pleasure to introduce Congressman Connor Lamb, a Marine, former federal prosecutor, and current representative of Pennsylvania's 17th congressional district in the Pittsburgh area. Lamb was first elected in a high-profile special election in 2018 when he won a district that Trump had won by nearly 20 points. Lamb won re-election twice, 2018 and 2020, in two of the most competitive congressional races in the country. In Congress, Lamb had been active on issues related to veterans, infrastructure, workers' rights, energy, and combating the heroin epidemic, among others. He serves as the vice chair of the Veterans Affairs Committee and serves on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee and the Science, Space, and Technology Committee. Lamb went to Pittsburgh Central Catholic High School and went to college and law school at the University of Pennsylvania. He was born and raised in Mount Lebanon and currently lives with his wife, Haley, and their son, Matthew. Lamb launched his campaign with an emphasis on protecting our democracy, protecting the rights to vote, and protecting workers' rights, as well as a commitment to protect and expand Medicare and Social Security and to raise the minimum wage. The congressman will now update us on his campaign and his issues resonating with Pennsylvania voters. Over to you, Congressman Lamb.
Hey, thank you guys for doing this and for taking such an interest in our state, even as you live elsewhere. And I'm really glad we were able to make this connection. I am also a Democrat who has lived abroad. When I was in the Marine Corps, I was stationed in Okinawa for about 2 years and had to deal with absentee voting and all that kind of thing. So it's only a small part, I know, of some of the challenges that you face retaining your citizenship and paying your taxes back here and everything. But I want you to know we are thinking about you, and I would love to be someone that helps if I'm elected to this position. Carl mentioned I started off this campaign talking about the democracy, and it really is on the line. It's probably worse than you even imagine when you see it up close, at least in Washington every day, the types of people that are on the other side of the aisle from us now. Of course, it's not every Republican, but particularly since January 6th, they have really shown how at an institutional level, they have taken the big lie and just enshrined it. They've placed it at the center of their party. And so, you know, not only did they excuse and justify and try to cover up what happened on January 6th and oppose efforts to investigate it and understand it, you know, they fired Liz Cheney from her leadership post just because she wanted to tell the truth. And of the 10 House Republicans that voted to impeach Trump afterward, almost all of them have been run out of the House of Representatives since then, simply because they wanted to tell the truth. So we're up against a lot here. The trend line is very bad in terms of where that party is heading. And it makes elections like the one that I am running in now all the more important. You know, there's a bunch of very specific reasons why the next senator from Pennsylvania will be so crucial. We have a 50-50 Senate. We are 1 or 2 votes away on voting rights, women's right to choose, everything that was in Build Back Better, raising the minimum wage, dealing with gun violence. I mean, there's like a pretty solid list. But in a more general way than that, this will be the most watched campaign in the entire country this year. It will probably be the most expensive Senate race in U.S. history. It will be the main barometer in a swing state like Pennsylvania for where people are going. And if they come out and they support the same party that pledges their loyalty to Trump and lies about January 6th and lies about so many other things, it's going to be a very bad sign for our country. If once again, we beat Trump and his surrogates on a very big and public stage, it will be a way of showing our country and the world that we stay on the right track. We know the difference between right and wrong, and that we're committed to preserving this form of government that we all inherited. I know what it takes to do that. I have been in tough situations before. As Carl mentioned, my first race was one that Trump won by almost 20 points, which is that's like starting off in a sports game 50,000 to nothing. And you're on the nothing side and you got to come back. And we found a way to do that by just going out and working hard, talking to everybody, answering every question, no matter who they were or who they voted for. And that's how I've maintained that seat now 3 times. This is my 4th campaign in 4 years. So it's been an intense period. I've learned a lot about how to win. In Pennsylvania, you need more than just the partisan Democrats. Everybody has to remember that. President Biden won it in 2020 by 80,000 votes, and 2 other Democrats lost statewide on the exact same ballots, same exact pool of voters. 80,000 of them picked Joe Biden and then picked 2 Republicans, and they picked Republicans in both sides of the state legislature. That's what it takes to win in our state. You've got to be able to get the Democrats and the swing voters. Both groups are critically important. And that's what we've been able to do in our congressional races. I've then been able to go to Washington and cast the votes that you care about on all the Democratic priorities I mentioned, all those things that we're just 1 vote away on. I voted for every single one of them: the Voting Rights Act, Women's Health Protection Act, minimum wage, Build Back Better. And I'm just trying to take that vote over to the Senate where it can be decisive. So I'll stop there and looking forward to your questions and discussion.
So, thank you very much, Mr. Lamb. So, Congressman Lamb, I'd now like to introduce the Veterans and Military Families Caucus of Democrats Abroad to present a couple of questions. The VMF is made up of the Democrats Abroad members from around the world who are willing and able to advocate on issues important to veterans, active duty and reserve military members, and their families with the United States of America and those living abroad. Please welcome Cristina Valverde of the Veterans and the Military Families Caucus.
Thank you, Carl, and welcome, Congressman Lamb. Thank you for being here. As Carl said, my name is Christine Valverde. I vote in PA06, and I've lived in New Zealand for about 20 years, currently residing near Mount Ruapehu. I've lived all over New Zealand in that time. And
what time is it where you are now?
3:18 a.m.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you for getting up in the middle of the night.
Oh, that's not rare. But thank you. I am chair of Democrats Abroad New Zealand, but I'm here today as said earlier, as with my Veterans and Military Families Caucus hat on. I do have a couple of questions for you. Can student veterans abroad count on you to co-sponsor and support Representative Sherrill's legislation to require the VA to update its electronic payment system so that it can pay GI Bill tuition to overseas schools instead of sending paper checks that it's done electronically? Paper checks take months to arrive, and it's becoming increasingly difficult to actually cash checks. Banks overseas are not accepting checks anymore, and neither are a lot of institutions. So that is a part 2 bill to a bill that you actually co-sponsored.
That's right. I don't think Mikey has introduced the second part of it, but when she does, I'll be co-sponsoring this one as well.
You will be. Okay, excellent. That's what we were looking for your support on that. So thank you. If you'd like to speak to the importance of it, that is, it addresses the GI Bill rights that were guaranteed and that are now very, very difficult for some students abroad to access.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And it's part of a broader effort that we're trying to do, really to just bring the VA into the 21st century in terms of how they give out these benefits in a way that is more, just realistic for how people are living their lives now. We've had a number of problems in the last few years with them tying the checks to certain zip codes and stuff that don't actually match. I mean, a lot of people are moving. They're going to more than one school, maybe. They're stacking up credentials instead of traditional 4-year path. And we're trying to get to the VA in a more electronic, instantaneous posture so that they can really support people while they're making the choices that they're making. So it's a great question, and we're definitely going to keep working on it.
Okay, great. Thanks. My other question is about another one of BMF's top priorities, HR 1182. Which, if passed, would effectively halt the deportation of non-citizen veterans. What are your thoughts on possible passage, and can you give us any sort of timeline on that?
Yeah, I don't know the timeline. The chairman of our Veterans Committee is the one who introduced that, so I'm sure we'll be taking it up in committee. And like him, I am very sympathetic about and angry about the fact that so many veterans were deported under President Trump, particularly to Mexico. I served in the Marine Corps with a lot of immigrants from all around the world, and it's the last thing you ever want to think, that people who were willing to make the ultimate sacrifice for this country would actually be kicked out unfairly. So there may be a little bit of fine tuning we have to do there, just to make sure that, obviously I think we would all want to make sure that the government still retains the ability to deport people who actually are breaking very serious laws like violent crimes or sexual misconduct. I know we don't want to think that military members do that, but you have to remember I'm a military prosecutor, so there are small numbers of our force that do actually commit crimes like that. So that would be my only critique at this point, is I'm not sure if it's exactly as fine-tuned that it needs to be, but that's why we go through the committee process in Congress, because we make sure these bills can be amended and put in the best possible position to be passed.
Thank you very much, Congressman. Those were the two questions I had for you tonight. Thank you for your time.
So, thank you very much, Christina and the VMF Caucus, for joining us. Kimberly, are there any audience questions?
Yes, we do have an audience question for Congressman Lamb. Tom would like to know where you stand on abolishing the filibuster, Congressman Lamb.
I'm for getting rid of it completely. Happy to explain more, but that's a pretty simple issue. And I want to make sure you guys get the questions you want in. So yeah, let's get rid of it.
Great, thank you. We appreciate that. I can bring up the next question from Hong, who would like to know your position on student loans in America.
The terms are unfair. I think people were marketed a lot of things about student loans and that didn't turn out to be true. So I'm for some level of forgiveness. I don't know what level we can get agreement on, but Biden proposed 10,000. I think that'd be fair. That would take care of a lot of the truly working class people who, have an amount of principal that they just can't get around because they don't earn enough money. Throughout the pandemic, I've been leading an effort to get members of Congress continually calling on the administration to extend the freeze in student loan payments. You haven't had to pay student loans, federal student loans, at least during the pandemic, and that's coming up again in May. I just led another letter with the Pennsylvania delegation to try to extend that. Last time Biden extended it on the same day he got our letter, so I thought that might have shown that we were persuasive. But it's the terms of the student loans that really need to be fixed when we get back to the drawing board, because the interest rates are too high. It's too hard to refinance. They're charging you interest while you're still in school. There's just a lot of things about it that we need to change. And longer term, of course, we just need a system where people are not compelled to take out that much on the front end. And that's why we were supporting things like 2 years of free community college, for example, to try to lighten the load for people.
Representative,
Great, thank you. I think we have time.
Oh, I'm sorry to interrupt that, but I just have to ask this question because we never ever hear this component of student loan, the issue, and I would love to get your view on it. One of the problems is that the loans were given on a compound interest basis. That means that the interest was growing at a greater rate than anyone could keep up with. And I just wondered if there was a chance that we could just eliminate the interest, keep people responsible for the amount they borrowed, but actually delete the interest, because that is what's killing people as it keeps compounding at a much higher rate than it should be. Thank you. I'm sorry to interrupt. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point, and I'm aware of the problem. I don't actually know technically if we have the ability to sort of rewrite those contracts now. I think one of the reasons they were looking at forgiveness was it's a very simple way technically to lighten the load for people. But you are totally right, and if there's a way to change that, I would like to, because one of the problems you hear about is, I think a lot of us on this call probably think of like doctors and lawyers and people with graduate degrees when it comes to student loans, but an enormous percentage of the people holding these who are having trouble repaying them are people who went to school for only a year or two. They might only have $10,000 or $15,000 in principal, but because they didn't finish the degree, they're working in a low-wage job, and that compounding interest continues to compound and means they're never going to repay that principal on the salary that they now earn. So the $10,000 of forgiveness may not sound a lot to a lawyer, but to someone like that, it's a ton, and that's why we want to try to get that done. So I'm with you, and I'm glad you brought that up.
Thank you so much.
I think we have time for one more quick audience question. Bruce would like to know what you will do as a U.S. Senator to accelerate climate change mitigation in order to meet our 2030 goals.
Yeah, great question, Bruce. I mean, everything that was in the Build Back Better bill that passed the House with my vote was kind of the latest and greatest Democratic thinking on that. And, I think a lot of people would see a carbon tax as number one. That doesn't really have enough political support, even in the Democratic Party, unfortunately. So the Biden people sort of threw that out the window. And the next best option was this thing they came up with, the clean power payment programs to try to subsidize clean power generation. And then there was a lot of other money in there for I come from Western Pennsylvania. So apart from making electricity, you have to think about making steel, cement, running freight rail. These are still things we have a lot of in our area. And so there were a lot of grant programs in there to basically try to drive forward those technologies. It's going to cost a lot of money. I mean, we need some serious technological advances where only the government is really going to take that level of risk. But we also have the best higher education system in the world, a lot of the most innovative researchers. We're really in a good position to do it, but we have to commit to it over time and with budgets. And that's what we're really pushing to do. Nuclear, I'm a big nuclear person as well. And I think that would, once we make those advances on the next generation of nuclear reactors, that's going to help us quite a bit.
Thank you. That's wrapping up our audience questions. Carl?
Okay, so many thanks for joining us today, Congressman Lamb, and best of luck on the campaign trail. Please help spread the word that Pennsylvanians can vote from abroad, and let them know we're here to help.
That's great. Thank you guys for taking such an interest and for voting. I really appreciate it. And I won't forget you. If I get in there, we'll be active on some of these issues, and who knows, maybe even someday I'll get to see you out there in Europe or wherever you are. So thanks a lot for tuning in.
Thank you. And I will now hand off to my fellow Pennsylvania State Team member, Sally Swartz, who will introduce our next candidate, the State Representative Malcolm Kenyatta.
Yes, thank you very much, Connor. My name is Sally Swartz, and I'm a Cumberland County voter that's in the middle of the county outside Harrisburg and reside in Paris, France. I have the pleasure of introducing State Representative Malcolm Kenyatta, who currently serves as Vice Chair of the Philadelphia State House Delegation and is a member of the Governor's Task Force on Suicide Prevention, in addition to a host of other committee leadership positions. He received a BA from Temple University, an MS from Drexel University, and completed the Harvard Kennedy School's Executives in State and Local Government program. As the first openly LGBTQ person of color and one of the youngest members elected to the PA General Assembly, he is deeply committed to creating an equitable and inclusive society, as is, I may add, Democrats Abroad. As a legislator, Malcolm has championed proposals to address generational poverty, raise the minimum wage, protect workers' rights, increase access to mental health care, common sense measures to address gun violence, and protect our digital infrastructure. In 2020, he was chosen by Vice President Joe Biden to give the keynote address at the Democratic National Convention, along with a group of other rising stars. He lives in North Philadelphia, where I might add my grandparents had a pharmacy at 23rd and Lehigh many, many years ago, with his partner, Dr. Matthew Miller. He will now share his vision for how he will work to realize the American promise for all. Thank you for joining us, Representative Kenyatta.
Sally, what a wonderful introduction. Thank you so much. And I am more than happy to come visit you in Paris whenever you need.
Anytime.
Okay?
I'm actually speaking to you from Provence in the south of France.
Listen,
so
and
you
I will
can
just,
visit
you know,
there as
just
well.
tete over. Yeah, I'll be happy to be there. Let me just start by saying thank you. Seriously, I know that folks are in different time zones, you're everywhere, but you understand how important Pennsylvania is to the national conversation, and certainly how important American leadership is around the world. And so thank you. For me, let me just emphasize the point that I think we all agree on here. We really need to win this election. But for me, we need to get really serious about how we're going to get that done. We're not going to get it done by spending all this time talking about the last guy who was impeached twice, who we already beat. This election is going to be about why people should trust Democrats with a bigger and bolder majority and what that's going to mean for their actual lives. It's why we've spent this entire campaign talking about what I call America's basic bargain. It's this idea that you can have one good job backed up by a union, or if you have a great idea and you want to start a small business, that there's an environment for you to start that business, for it to grow and thrive. It's about the certainty of knowing that your kids are going to get to go to a good, fully funded public school, and that they're going to have every opportunity and chance because they got a quality education. It is about being able to go to the doctor if you get sick, and being able to afford the prescription when you leave the appointment. And then finally, it's about the ability for people to retire with a level of dignity in a house that they were able to afford in the first darn place, in a community that is safe and clean, that has clean air and clean water. That is what is at stake. I think back so frequently, for a bunch of reasons, to the 2016 election. And if Didn't Vote was a candidate for president, Didn't Vote would have won. And we might have been better off with 4 years of nobody in there instead of what we got. But what that should highlight for us is that the threat to our democracy is not isolated to people who are trying to make it more difficult to vote. That threat is real. They want to shut people up. They don't want you voting. But there's a lot of people who have self-selected to throw their vote away because they don't believe that Democrats, Republicans, anybody is really in it for them and is really going to do something that makes their lives different. I understand that frustration. It's why I know I'll be the best messenger to go everywhere and speak to anybody about what is at stake in this election and about what is broken. My parents, I grew up in a working poor family here in North Philadelphia. My parents were the best people in the world, I always joke, but they didn't like each other. So they separated when I was pretty young. My dad was a social worker, my mom was a healthcare aide. And I would watch her work 12, 16 hours a day and then have to come home and ration her insulin. I lived 6 different places by the time I graduated high school. Got my first job at 12, washing dishes at this little vegan soul food restaurant, believe it or not. And then tragically, I buried both of my parents by the time I was 27, simply because they didn't have the type of healthcare we deserve. And so in this moment, it's not good enough to just have another Washington politician asking for your vote. We need somebody who actually understands your life and understands the lives of people who could very easily stay home. President Obama said it best. Democrats, we get shellacked in these midterm elections because the coalition that shows up in presidential years is not the coalition that always shows up in these midterm elections. I think I'm best positioned to put that coalition together and then for the next 6 years be an unequivocal voice and fighter for working people. So I'll stop there. And again, I'm so grateful to be with you.
Well, that sounds good to all of us. Thank you, Representative Kenyatta, for sharing your vision for Pennsylvania and for the bigger United States. I would like now to introduce Democrats Abroad Global Black Caucus, which is made up of DA members of all ethnicities from around the world, Democrats nevertheless, who are willing and able to advocate on issues important to Black Americans within the United States and those living abroad. I'll invite Jazz now from the Global Black Caucus to ask a few questions. Go ahead, Jazz.
Hi, Sally. Thank you very much for the introduction, and good day to everybody, and good day to Representative Kenyatta. It's a great pleasure having you here with us today. And my name is Leon Jasmore. I am the chair of the Global Black Caucus from Democrats Abroad and the DPCA voting rep of Democrats Abroad Switzerland. I'm residing in France and in Switzerland, and I vote in Texas. So I unfortunately cannot vote for y'all. But again, on behalf of the Global Black Caucus, thank you very, very much to the state teams that are organizing these very, very important events for us to get to know and meet the candidates to have a really, really good feel of what's happening in our home state. Mr. Kenyatta, I have two questions for you from the Global Black Caucus. First one would be, how do you put your ideas into practice, and how will you help working families?
So, very much the same way that I've done in Harrisburg, in a very tough environment. And I always say to people, Harrisburg is worse than Washington, in part because it does not get the same attention or focus. And so, every little bill, unless it's, a really, really big deal, people don't know what's going on. And I get to work with, for Lent, I'm trying to cuss less. And so I'm going to say knuckleheads. I get to work with some people who really behave in bad ways on occasion. But this is my approach, because I do believe when the election is over, you have to find ways to work with whoever's there. And I had a former colleague who's since passed, Representative O'Brien, who said to me, Malcolm, it is your job as a legislator to try to see in your colleagues what the voters in their district saw in them. And I've tried to take that approach. But let me be very clear on this. I am not a safe harbor for nonsense. And so if folks want to make it more difficult for you to vote, they want to make it more difficult for people to organize on the job, for women to be able to control their bodies, then no, I'm going to be their biggest opponent. But if they want to actually work on things that make sense, then sign me up to be involved in that. That's why I've been able to work with folks on things like cybersecurity, strengthening our digital infrastructure. Pennsylvania had two massive ransomware attacks against the Department of Health and against our state Senate, where a lot of personal information of Pennsylvanians was put at real risk. We need to make sure that can happen less frequently and that we're better prepared. Same is true around criminal justice reform. But one of the most important issues for me has been around mental health care. I talked to then Vice President Biden about a bill that I introduced called Phillips Law, which I introduced with a Republican. It was the second most co-sponsored bill in the House in the last session. Little Phil's 11 years old, died by suicide. His grandmother called me. It was still the worst call I've ever received as an elected official. And as I sat with that family, got some folks to take care of the funeral, moved them out of the house, I promised them to never forget about little Phil and all the other little Phils. And I wanted to have a legislation that reimagined the way we provide mental health care to our kids. I talked to then Vice President Biden about this. I was campaigning for him in New Hampshire. And I said, you should consider doing something like this and adding it to your platform. And he said, let me read it. And if you go to the Biden-Harris agenda, you will see that Phillips Law is one of the bills that he wants to get passed during his time in Washington. And so, that's just a little look at an impact I've been able to make already as a state elected official. I'm really looking forward to what we're going to be able to do as a U.S. Senate.
Thank you very much. And my second question I got for you is, if you are elected, you would be Pennsylvania's first Black, Indigenous, person of color senator, and you would be Pennsylvania's first openly LGBTIQ plus senator. Why do you think this is so important in this race?
Yeah, I've heard that before. And, I'll be the first openly gay man in the U.S. Senate, period. And I'm, it's not lost on me that just by virtue of who I am, those different distinctions will make a little bit of history. But that's not why we are running. I'm running because of the things that I mentioned, because of our real need to pass the PRO Act and raise the minimum wage, because of the real need for us to really make historic level investments into our public schools. I've called for us to quadruple the amount of funding into our Title I schools, making sure portions of those funds go to support mental health care. It's why I've talked so much about the Social Security Expansion Act, about making it easier for people to buy that first home, about canceling student loan debt, for borrowers, about actually taking on the climate crisis. And I've been the only person in this race who's not tried to have it both ways and say, well, I know that there's a climate crisis, but let's just keep doing whatever we're doing right now. You can't have it both ways. We have to treat this with the urgency that it deserves. And as a US Senator, I will.
Well,
thank you very,
thank you
very
for that.
much. The best of luck to you and to all the other candidates.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jazz, and thanks to the Black Global Caucus for joining us today and those two really good questions. I'm now going to take advantage of the fact that I'm a member of the PA state team and get a chance to ask you a question. And here it is. A woman's right to choose is under a GOP-led attack. There are more than half of the states in the United States who have passed laws that effectively overturn Roe versus Wade and make it impossible to get an abortion. So my question to you is, what are your views on how to best protect women's reproductive health and our bodily autonomy? Let me know what you think here. Back to you.
Thank you so much for bringing this up, Sally, because this is a core issue that is about whether or not we are going to, in the year of our Lord 2022, start treating women like they're not full citizens and have full bodily autonomy. Legislation in Texas putting bounties on the heads of folks seeking abortion access, or even in Missouri, where if you leave the state because you don't like what Missouri is doing, they still want to allow people to be able to sue women for determining what to do with their own bodies. And in the Missouri case, the rapist of a woman could sue for somebody deciding to terminate a pregnancy. For me, this is very simple. Abortion access is healthcare. Healthcare is a human right. We need to treat it like it. But I have not waited on getting to the Senate to act on this issue. I worked with my colleague, Representative Morgan Cephas, who's co-chair of the PA Women's Health Caucus, and we introduced a Pennsylvania version of the Women's Health Protection Act, which we need to get done at the national level, which would enshrine the protections of Roe. But at the state level, we still have many hurdles that exist for people who want to access their basic right to abortion care. And we need to get rid of those hurdles. And I'm going to continue to push and fight to make sure we do that at the state and at the federal level. This is an issue I've been working on for a very long time. I was the first male ever elected to the board for the National Organization for Women in Philadelphia, one of the biggest chapters in the country. And so, you know, it didn't take Texas to do what they did for me to understand that this right was at risk. And with the Supreme Court's refusal to uphold precedent and strike down the Texas law, they have tactically made Roe irrelevant. And that's why you see so many other states following suit. It's a disgrace, and we have to protect these rights. But what it's going to take is to have more working people in the US Senate who understand this challenge, because at the end of the day, we know that when it comes to abortion access, this is a racial justice issue and an issue about income inequality more than anything else, because it's poor women who are going to be the most at risk of not being able to get abortion as we see these restrictions become more and more common.
You got that right. Thank you very much. And back to Kimberly. Thank you very much.
Hi, Representative
Kimberly.
Kenyatta. We do have a question for you from the audience. Considering that the Pennsylvania State GOP has tried to have mail-in ballots, many of them ours, disqualified in 2020, what steps has Pennsylvania taken to protect our votes in 2022 and beyond?
So here, I'm the guy. And I'm very, happy to take credit for fighting the Republicans every single time on this, and actually have a lot of success in winning. There are a lot of people who were voices for this issue, faces for this issue. They were on TV, but I was actually in the room making sure what the Republicans wanted to do. They wanted to do an Arizona-style audit as the election was happening. I mean, I'm still gobsmacked by this. As it was happening, they wanted to be able to subpoena ballots, impound voting machines, and the list goes on. And so we were able to stop them, and not because they didn't have more votes than us, but because I took a lot of the things I learned as a organizer in my community to explain to people what was going on and then tell them how they could be involved to help us stop it. And I take it as a real badge of honor my Republican, the leader on the Republican side in the House, sent out this, Scooby-Doo villain press release against me, saying, and we would have gotten away with it too if it wasn't for, they call me, I don't know, they call me some mean names, whatever the hell they said. But I asked my staff to print that out for me because I love it. I love it. Every time they're trying a little scheme that's going to make it more difficult for your vote to be counted, they can look forward to me being a brick wall against it. And as the Democratic chair of our subcommittee on campaign finance and elections, there are a few things, unfortunately, and it is unfortunate, that I've learned more about at my time in the legislature than voting rights and what it takes to protect them and to make them more accessible to folks. But we need to get some of these things passed at the federal level. And I know I'm coming up on time, but I just want to make this point. My grandfather, Muhammad Kenyatta, was a civil rights activist. And I remember meeting John Lewis, who they crossed paths during their activism randomly in a mall in Atlanta. And I think about him often, and people who want to praise him and celebrate him, they put out these obligatory tweets saying, wasn't he so great? John Lewis doesn't need another damn tweet about how awesome he was. He was a giant. What he needs is for his life's work to continue to matter. And I find it pretty despicable that with Democratic control of the White House, the House, and the Senate, that we have not already passed the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, passed the For the People Act, and gotten dark money out of politics and made it more possible for working people to have their voices heard.
Thank you so much for your answer and spending some time with us today. We really appreciate it.
You.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you all. And I think I'm at time here, but I'm really, really grateful for the opportunity. And again, I am more than happy to visit any of you, and wherever you are, just send me an invite.
We're all happy to have you.
Take care, everybody. And Matt Daggett's going to also put in my cell phone number. And this is my actual cell phone number. So don't call me too late. Okay, but I will take it. Bye, everybody. Take care.
Thank you so much, Malcolm. And I think our chair, Candace, would like to say something. Go ahead, Candace.
Sure. Thank you, Sally. And thank you, Representative Kenyatta, for joining us, as well as Representative Lamb. We're about midway through now. We're going to hear from the other two candidates, Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman, as well as Alexandria Khalil. So we're about midpoint right now. And I did just want to take a very quick opportunity. We talked a little bit about this as a beginning as fellow Pennsylvanians within Democrats Abroad, what we're doing to get out the vote. And I wanted to invite all of you to be a part of our phone banking campaigns. We're calling thousands of Pennsylvanians living overseas. This summer, we're going to be calling more, texting more, running extensive direct mail programs to those 36,000 overseas voters that we discussed to make sure, again, that they show up this November for this critical U.S. Senate seat in Pennsylvania. So I did just want to take the opportunity to invite you to volunteer with us, as well as to donate with us. We are entirely volunteer run. So everyone who put together today's event is a volunteer, and they're doing it because they know that it matters. Every one of our phone bankers is a volunteer, and they're doing it because they know it matters, but we do count on your generosity and your volunteerism to keep our organization going. So I'll pop those links in the chat. Thank you for your support. And with that, I will toss it to David Miviser, my colleague in Canada, to introduce the next candidate. So thank you, Sally, and toss it over to David.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. My name is David Miviser. I'm a state college voter, and I'm living in Hamilton, Ontario. I have the pleasure today of introducing Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman, a Pennsylvania native. John Fetterman was born to teenage parents in York, just starting out on their own. As a young man, John joined AmeriCorps and served in Pittsburgh's historic Hill District, where he helped set up the first computer labs in the neighborhood and taught GED classes to young parents. He went on to earn a master's in public policy from Harvard University's Kennedy School of Government. Then John started a GED program in the town of Braddock, one of the poorest and most challenged communities in Pennsylvania. In 2005, encouraged by his students, John ran for mayor and managed to win by one single vote. In his 13 years as mayor, John worked to rebuild his community, creating jobs, getting youth engaged, and bringing creative urban policy solutions to Braddock. First as mayor, and now as lieutenant governor, John has been on the forefront of progress, pushing for marijuana legalization before it was popular, officiating at a same-sex marriage before it was legal, and advocating for universal health coverage long before it was mainstream. He's now running for US Senate to keep fighting for forgotten places and working people like he has his whole career. So thank you so much for joining us today, Lieutenant Governor Fetterman.
Oh, thanks, everyone for inviting me and allowing me to spend time before you, and thank you for all of the hard work that you do, despite not physically being in the United States. You're actually helping shape the direction of our country's political outcomes, and I can't think of anything more noble or quite frankly more important. I know there's roughly 35,000 of you living abroad here in Pennsylvania, and that is a critical mass of votes, quite frankly, that could very well determine, either the gubernatorial outcome or this Senate race, because it's definitely going to be a tight and tough season for Democrats in Pennsylvania. Obviously, I'm sure you follow what's going on in Pennsylvania, but if you're not living here on the ground day to day, it's going to be a challenging environment. We must remember that. And if one vote transformed my entire life and allowed me to get into public service, 35,000 of your votes can actually transform Pennsylvania's trajectory and turn this seat blue here in 2020. And I'm not here to claim that I'm the best candidate. That is your job and the job of every voter here in Pennsylvania to decide, who is the best person in the Democratic mantle. My job, as I understand it and see it, is to talk about my record and talk about this campaign and allow you to do your job. And I'm proud to say that, we have run and won statewide here in Pennsylvania. I started out as a program director and a GED instructor in one of the most forgotten communities in Pennsylvania. Made a great impact. 1,000 young people ended up getting their GEDs that may not have otherwise had that opportunity to. Ended up running for mayor because two of my students were lost to gun violence, and won by that one vote. And ever since then, it's been about running for what I think are important core democratic values and issues. And I did just that in my first race for the United States Senate back in 2016. We were badly under-resourced, but we were running on a very, very core democratic values and principles and policies. Some in 2015 said that might have been too left, or that's not where the Democratic Party was. Well, guess what? 6 years later, that's exactly where the Democratic Party is and where it should have always been, quite frankly. And we're very proud of that fact. In 2016, we barely had money for gas to get to events all across Pennsylvania. But now in 2022, everything's changed in that sense, but not the values, the people, places, and policies. I'm proud to say that we have now nearly 195,000 grassroots donors from everywhere. We are the most, and really the only, truly Pennsylvania-powered campaign in this race. We're the only campaign in this race that derives a majority, and in our case, a significant majority of our money right from Pennsylvania voters, not out of state voters. And that's critical because we need a new kind of map in this race. It's going to be a tough cycle. We are 90% of Pennsylvania's zip codes. That means that they're across Pennsylvania, our support is spread throughout. And that has made a new map, by this campaign. And what does that translate into on the ground? We have over 5,000 volunteers that are ready and are actively out making calls, knocking on doors, getting ready. It's only 45 odd days away. That has given us a commanding lead in every poll, but not just on the Democratic side, but on Republicans in matchups as well too. I don't think any of you living abroad would have suspected that a weirdo celebrity TV doctor was going to jump into this Senate primary, but that's exactly what's happened. And the major candidates on the Republican side, none of whom actually reside in Pennsylvania. They're from Connecticut, New Jersey, and California, respectively. So this race is going to come down to who can make sure that we appeal to enough voters to get this done and flip this seat and turn it blue. And I'm also proud to say we are the only Democratic campaign that's up on television right now in Pennsylvania, statewide, on both cable and broadcast. And we have the resources to increase continually and through the end of the primary. So the race is going very well. And towards those ends, we believe that it's going to be critical to go every county, every vote, and make sure that we are suppressing the kind of voter enthusiasm and turnout that allowed Donald Trump to win in 2016, because he actually won by a margin not much larger than your numbers abroad. He won by roughly 45,000 votes, and we know how all that worked out. And then Joe Biden won by a larger margin, but still a very small one, by 80,000 votes in 2020. Now, in the middle of that, I was the only Pennsylvanian in history to defeat an incumbent lieutenant governor and win a crowded and competitive Democratic primary by nearly 40% of the vote, and go on. And I joined the governor in the ticket in the fall of 2018. And our ticket in 2018 received 1 million more votes than the ticket with Governor Wolf and my predecessor just 4 short years ago, 1 million more votes. And we actually beat our Republican opponents by 852,000 votes in between two incredibly close races here in Pennsylvania that came down to a combined total of 120,000 votes. And those are the kind of numbers and margins that we're going to need to produce in this race. And this is already going to be a significant headwind blowing against Democrats. You know, we are also running an entirely clean, positive campaign. We are not relying on super PAC or any kind of dark money. We are a grassroots powered campaign, $28 a pop, leading the country, quite frankly, as Republican or Democratic challengers in just how organic and grassroots our campaign has been. And that's my promise to you. If any of you have supported our campaign or are considering it, it'll never be weaponized. Your resources will never be weaponized against a fellow Democrat. This is a crucial race that could determine the outcome of who controls the Senate. We believe that we are uniquely situated to win this race, but we're not saying that at the expense of anyone else in this race or any of the other candidates that you've heard from or will hear from on this call. We're simply here to saying that we've run and won statewide, and we've built a campaign that we're quite proud of, that is unparalleled in its intensity and its appeal and its grassroots funding and structure as we are 45 days out. So I'm grateful for the work that you do, that you still have skin in the game and you are actively helping, because on the ground here in Pennsylvania, it's going to be tough. And our campaign is based on that one single core value that really started my entire career, that every county, every vote. We have gone to every county throughout our entire career, and we have the kind of relationships in place that we believe are going to be critical to suppressing Republican margins out of these deeply red counties. So it's going to be a tough cycle, but it's one that is very winnable. And our campaign is structured at a level unlike any of the Democratic campaigns, and especially the Republican campaigns, as they're not even living here in the state. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak with you all here today. As your lieutenant governor, I've championed issues from second chances and revolutionized that aspect of our criminal justice platform here in Pennsylvania, as well as been a strong and tough pushback against attempts for the Republicans to overturn the elections here in 2020. That's the kind of voice that I'll be. And if any of you abroad are a Democrat in the vein of a Joe Manchin, and no disrespect. I mean, there's no disrespect. If Joe Manchin is the kind of Democrat, then I'm not. I believe Democrats need to vote like Democrats and get some important things done. We were the first campaign to call for the elimination of the filibuster because we do not believe that there are 10 to 12 Republican senators of conscience that are going to somehow magically join us and pass an agenda that has very basic fundamental things like a minimum wage, voting rights protections, codifying Roe v. Wade, basic gun control legislation, passing the PRO Act, all these basic fundamental things that we should get done. And that's the position of our campaign. We are going to go to get things done. And if you trust me with your vote in May and in November, you're never going to have to worry about my vote changing or hearing that, well, he's changed his mind on minimum wage, or he's changed his mind on healthcare, he's changed his mind on voting rights, or any of these bills. It's not necessary that I must agree with everything in Build Back Better, where I would hold it hostage and ultimately, stop its passage. It really is about the kind of times that we're living in, meeting the moment. And I would gladly sacrifice my political career, should it ever come to that point, to pass any one of those critical pieces of legislation or bills that have been blocked because of the lack of unity and our willingness as the caucus, Democratic caucus, to join together and eliminate the filibuster and get this stuff done. We have the White House, the House, and the Senate, and we must seize that opportunity to do what's right for the American people, because the Republicans are committed to hijacking the next election and making it impossible for us to ever achieve those goals. And for those that don't support eliminating the filibuster because what the Republicans may do, I promise you, that's tops on their list if they're ever in that situation. So I think we need to take the reins while we can. And that's the kind of candidate and the kind of senator I would be if I'm lucky enough to be Pennsylvania's next senator. So thank you for the opportunity to speak here today.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor Fetterman, for sharing. We have a few questions we'd like to ask. The first one is from Nick Lee, who's a member of our Democrats Abroad Taxation Task Force. Our Taxation Task Force researches U.S. tax policy affecting Americans abroad and develops and executes initiatives aimed at reform. So Nick has a question that he'll share with you.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you for coming on here to speak to us, Lieutenant Fetterman. I'm a voter from the Caucus area. I grew up there, and I'm just offering affordable education.
Nick, we can't hear your audio.
Is my audio not working?
Right.
Okay, audio problems. Is my sound better now?
Oh, good, very good. Keep going.
Okay, yes, so sorry about that. Yeah, so I'm a voter from the King of Prussia area. I grew up there and I moved abroad for an affordable education. I live in the Netherlands with my Dutch partner, whom I met in university. And as introduced, I'm a member of the Democrats Abroad Taxation Task Force. The US tax code is impossibly complex and costly for working and middle-class Americans living abroad, like myself. We struggle to open basic bank accounts in the countries we live in, to save for retirement, or to save for our children's future due to overburdensome account reporting regulations. In some countries, like the Netherlands, banks go as far as requiring proof of citizenship renunciation before letting people born in the US open a savings or retirement account, out of fear of having a US tax resident as a customer. With taxes being too complicated to comply with and overburdensome bank reporting regulations penalizing people for being American, this has a knock-on effect on overseas voter turnout. Can we count on you to support overseas tax reform for Americans living abroad? What opportunities do you see? You're muted.
Lieutenant Governor, you're muted.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't even mute myself. Anyway, so yes, I don't understand why Congress is often preoccupied with passing the Trump tax cuts, for example, or generous corporate tax avoidance loopholes, and they make your lives needlessly more expensive, complicated, and difficult. So I absolutely would support all of those things, whether it's the Overseas American Financial Access Act. I guess is that HR 5799. I want to make sure I get that right. And then the Commission on Americans Living Abroad Act. And then also the tax simplification for Americans abroad. You know, those that parcel package of common sense reforms that are basic. And if I was your next United States Senator, I would absolutely support just the basic streamlining and simplification to make your lives as citizens living abroad that much easier. And my commitment to that would be would mirror that of others' commitment to making sure that billionaires or corporations pay less tax. We need to look out for folks just like you know, taxpayers, and make your lives more simple, more straightforward, and allow you to live your best life wherever that is outside the United States, while you maintain your involvement here in this country. And that's my promise to you as somebody who could be your next United States Senator. It does not make any sense to behave any other way as a nation, to penalize folks like you that are just living outside our borders, yet still making important contributions to our country. So
thank you for that.
Great. Well, thank you, Nick, and the Taxation Task Force for that very important question. And Lieutenant Governor Fetterman, I'd like to pose a question on behalf of our Pennsylvania state team. Could you talk about what is the role that Americans living abroad should play in this election? And what do you think are the most valuable ways that we can contribute to building a better America?
Sure. I have to say, I don't believe I don't believe it's my right to suggest what anyone should be doing in this election. I mean, my hope for voters like you, you're all obviously concerned and informed and committed voters. Otherwise, you wouldn't be on this call. So I take that as a given. I'm grateful for the work that you're willing to do, making phone calls, being involved, paying attention, and realizing just how much is at stake. That means everything. And it's not just a feel-good story. I literally am sitting on this call as the Lieutenant Governor of Pennsylvania because of one single vote I received 17 years ago in May of 2005. So nobody understands the importance of one vote, quite like I do, at least in this race. And I don't take any vote for granted, let alone 35,000 or more votes that all of you collectively have, and the power that you all wield could be determinative in this race. And that's not an exaggeration. This is going to be a tough cycle for Democrats and those that are committed to making the biggest bang for their involvement buck, so to speak. Voting, making sure that you vote, making sure that you're making calls and doing things of that nature. Donate and support your favorite organization or candidate, because it is a big state that is in a tough cycle. But for me to say that you need to do that, it's like, if you're willing to do that, you're in a very unique situation as a group of folks living abroad, because this election is going to be close and it's going to have a huge impact on our country's future. So the work that you're willing to collectively do may very well be the difference here. And so for that, thank you. I mean, if you look at the race in 2020, Arizona, 10,000 votes, Georgia, roughly 10,000 votes, Pennsylvania, 80,000 votes. I mean, these are not big margins here, and we need all hands on deck. And we're very grateful. I'm sure every candidate in this race feels the same. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you, but helping, it could literally mean the difference in who wins this race.
Hi, Lieutenant Governor Fetterman. Thank you so much for joining us. I do have an audience question for you, if you don't mind. Elliot would like to know if you support the use of ranked choice voting at local, state, and federal elections.
I'm not. I'm not sure in terms of. I think it needs to be studied more. I think it needs to see how it plays out better. I understand New York. New York City proper has it, and I followed it very closely with great interest in the recent mayoral election to see how it worked. It's an idea that I'd be open to, but I think it's something that needs more and more study. And from an election standpoint, I'm more, quite frankly, concerned with passing uniform and universal voting protections and acts in Pennsylvania. This is coming 100%. You can count on this. They are going to pass a constitutional amendment through ballot that will mandate universal voting ID every time you vote, not just time you sign up to register to vote, every time. And that is for the sole purpose of disenfranchising what are typically going to be older and Pennsylvanians of color on the socioeconomically challenged side. They know what they're doing, and they're going to try to screen out maybe 70 to 90,000 votes because at any time we know that there are going to be a segment of folks that just, for whatever reason, don't have access to their ID. I'd like to remind everybody there were 5 cases of voting fraud in Pennsylvania in 2020 out of 7 million ballots. 5 cases. You have a greater chance of than entering genuine voter fraud here. And that's the kind of lengths that they're going to attempt. So from my perspective, ranked choice voting is something that is worth exploring. But right now, in the here and now, I'm more concerned about making sure that we enshrine universal voting protections, preventing gerrymandering, declaring election day a national holiday so folks are able to have the day off and vote, and to make sure that we are not suppressing votes of those voters that they know darn well are more than likely to vote to support the Democratic side. So that's a cause that I took up as Lieutenant Governor. It's a cause I would take up as United States Senator. And it's one of the main reasons why I supported eliminating the filibuster, because if we cannot secure fair, open, uniform voting legislation and rights across our country, that it undermines the entire integrity of our democracy. And that's just something that we can't, quite frankly, tolerate, or should have to tolerate, quite frankly. But we know their playbook is all about Act 2, Trump 2.0 and 24, and those changes were already being implemented in states like mine or Arizona or Wisconsin. And we have the opportunity, and that window is closing as Democrats, to seize that and stop them from doing that. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Lieutenant Governor Fetterman. David? Well, many thanks to Lieutenant Governor Fetterman for joining us, and best of luck on the campaign trail. And please keep letting Pennsylvanians know, Pennsylvanians abroad know the importance of voting, and Pennsylvanians on the ground, the importance of their vote. I'd now like to hand it over to Jesse, another Pennsylvania state team member. Thank you, Lieutenant Governor Fetterman.
Thank you very much for having me.
You're very welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. Jesse, another PA state team member, is going to introduce our final candidate, Councilor Alex Khalil. Jesse.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jesse. I am a Montgomery County voter. I reside in Copenhagen, Denmark, and I'd like to introduce you all to our next candidate, which is Councilor Alex Khalil. Alex was born in Hackensack, New Jersey in 1962 to Palestinian Muslim immigrants, and her grandfather Mahmoud served in the U.S. Army in World War I, and her uncle Muhammad during the U.S. war in Vietnam. Alex has lived in Pennsylvania since 1983, and she holds a degree in electrical engineering technology, a master's in library and information science, and a law degree from Temple University. Alex is a member of the Jenkintown Borough Council and is first vice president of the Montgomery County Boroughs Association. She was selected to run as a Bernie Sanders delegate for Montgomery County, bringing the home team there with Montgomery County. Alex understands the struggles of small business owners. Her parents were small business owners, as are her aunts and uncles. She is a former small business owner and IT consultant. She also has a solo legal practice in New Jersey, specializing in small businesses, and has provided pro bono advocacy for special education and guardianships for parents of children with disabilities. I'll now let Alex tell us how she will bring community, compassion, justice, and prosperity to all Pennsylvanians, with an apology that we're starting a little bit late than previously planned, Alex.
No problem at all. It's a pleasure. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Wonderful. First of all, it's a pleasure to be here, and I thank you. It's great to hear my other colleagues, as I call them, their stances, and this is what's great about democracy. To hear great ideas, to hear how people will solve issues. Thank you for such a great introduction. I'm Alexandria Khalil. Everyone calls me Alex. Ever since I was born, everyone called me Alex. Please do. So that's why I go by Alex Khalil for U.S. Senate. I'm a local person, a local council person, an activist, a mom of a son with dyslexia, an attorney who you have heard has helped parents locally at their most intimate issues, getting education for their children, their disabled children, helping adults, parents of adult children with disabilities get guardianship. I understand community. Ever since I started in politics in 2007, my son and I were having a conversation about who to vote for in the election. And my son stopped me cold. He said, Mom, take a look at this guy, Barack Obama. He's the guy I'm voting for. You should too. What drew me to President Obama? What drew me to Bernie Sanders? What drew me as a local person to run at a community level was about community, about making a difference in community. In 2007, I was to meet a woman that was to change my life. I went to the door in Elkins Park, which for most people would think is a very wealthy community. And this woman said to me, and to the gentleman who I was standing with, who was the state representative, can you help us? Can you help me? My husband suffered a stroke. We're in our 80s and we're running out of money. And we can't pay our property tax. I was to hear the same plea. And I'm still here the same plea since 2007, 2012, 2016, 18, and to today. Recently, my neighbor up the street had to sell her home. She'd never been sick a day in her life. Her husband had died from an accident. She developed colon cancer and had to have radiation. She said, Alex, I've never been sick a day in my life. Well, she had had a high deductible insurance plan and almost all her life savings were wiped out. She developed neuropathy due to the colon cancer radiation. She had to sell her home. Couldn't physically afford to live in the house, because it was too much, but also financially had become too much. And so you sit back and you say to yourself, why have we not addressed the issues of people losing their homes, losing their life savings, their children not getting proper education because of disabilities, not being able to have jobs, people being unable to afford their health insurance, unable to afford their medicines. You know, as I go around the state, and again, as I said, since 2007, nothing has changed in terms of community. And so for me, it is so important that someone with the community's ear in mind, someone who knows that it isn't enough just to introduce legislation and then just, I've introduced it, good luck. It doesn't work that way. The pandemic showed us as Americans the wide gaps that we have in our community. Things that we had heard that people had been suffering, but never really saw it because everyone was working multiple jobs. You know, Senator Sanders said most people had $400, didn't have $400 in their bank account for a rainy day. And we saw that at the pandemic. pandemic. So we had to put a freeze on going after them for pay their property tax. Well, that has a cascading effect on a town. We saw long lines at our food bank. Neighbors told me they had nothing but tuna fish in their house because they hadn't received any help. Because remember, you folks talked about the issues with the VA and not having electronic systems. Well, in Pennsylvania, our unemployment computer systems are antiquated and could not take the burden of all these people applying for help. Our entire safeguards, we didn't have any. And so people just, with the help of communities, helped one another. Above everything else, it was community helping community members. And we saw just that we as a country had failed our communities. Our jobs, for the love of God, we didn't have gloves and masks for our people. We didn't have respirators. I look at this and I say, this chain must end. And anyone who goes to Washington must remember that they represent the various communities in Pennsylvania. In central Pennsylvania, where there's massive loss of population because of job scarcity, because jobs were shipped abroad by hedge funds, factories shut down. There are ways to bring back jobs there, whether through environmental remediation and energy innovation, through geothermal systems, through abandoned coal mines, tapping gas wells and oil wells. All those were jobs, but no one wanted to invest in those jobs because no one wanted to invest in those communities. I am here to tell you my commitment is whether you're a citizen living abroad who can't access a savings account or a checking account or VA benefits, or whether you're an elderly woman in Pottstown who has to work in her 80s because she can't afford to live, or a mother in Clarion County who couldn't afford her inhaler, or a woman in Jenkintown who is still waiting for her unemployment check and couldn't afford to eat. I am your champion. I am your champion. I will remember that every bit of legislation, and I will sit back and say, how does it affect all the counties in Pennsylvania? How does it affect every borough, every citizen? So whether it's illegal dumping in North Philadelphia, which has been ignored by every politician in Philadelphia, from the federal down to the council, or whether it's the abandoned coal mines, or the abandoned gas wells, oil wells, I will be your champion. And so I will fight for Medicare for all. I will fight for it to negotiate prescription drug costs. I will fight to sit back and make sure we fight for human rights. Putin didn't do what Putin did because it was a surprise. Human rights have been violated across the world. He just found it as an opportunity. I will fight to raise the minimum wage. And some people will say, well, you're a small person. Well, I want to tell you what no one else here has talked about. I'm the only person here who has Republicans tell me that you are my counselor. How will I get what I do? How am I going to get these things done? I am going to go to communities. I am going to do what I do as a borough council. I'm going to talk to people. I'm going to sit down on a Friday night and resolve issues. I am proud to say that I do that all the time. And I'm proud to say that in Jenkintown, whether you're a Democrat, Independent, or Republican, I hear you and I'm there for you. And as your United States Senator, I will be there for you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alex. We really appreciate you sharing your perspective on community and the importance of that in this space. I'd now like to introduce the Democrats Abroad Youth Caucus, which works to represent the interests of the generation of Americans living abroad who are really poised to take responsibility for the economic, the political, and the social issues of the future. So please welcome Miguel Madrigal Hidalgo from the Youth Caucus to ask a couple questions.
I'm honored. Thank you.
Good morning, Alex. Can I call you Alex? Is that okay?
Mom and Dad call me Alex. Call me Alex. please.
Okay, everyone. Okay, that's good. It seems to for me that almost every single candidate today is in a car. So congratulations. Um,
Thank you.
so
It's a beautiful Saturday. Just as a quick question to you, it's a beautiful Saturday, and we're out here in Allentown meeting the community, going to businesses, going to various stores, and just saying hi to the community. So that's why we're all in the car today. It's the day to do it.
Oh, well, that's good to know. I am here in beautiful sunny Costa Rica. I am 26 years old and I am a law school student, and I vote in the great state of Ohio. Pennsylvania is our next door neighbor. So whatever happens in Pennsylvania is also very important to people here in Ohio. Alex, my question for you is, if elected to the United States Senate, what concrete measures should the federal government take to make sure higher education is entirely free of cost, or at least more affordable? Will you introduce legislation to achieve that goal?
Yes, first I will introduce legislation to achieve that goal. It is disgraceful that we, the United States, have such a high cost for education. It used to not be that case. I mean, many, many years ago, actually, education was quite affordable. What has happened is we see this incredible inflation in terms of education. In Pennsylvania in particular, Pennsylvania is at the bottom of spending in education, period. So when it's pre-K all the way through college and trade schools. So at the state level, we are not doing our responsibilities. And if there is some way, and I will work with my colleagues across the board on this, to really hit states that are not properly funding education. So whether it's a carrot or stick approach, we need to do that. We need to sit back and take a look at colleges. Why are they raising these tuition rates at such a great rate? It makes no sense. Why is Temple University, which I went to, undergrad and law school, their tuition rate so high? Why are they building sports stadiums in the middle of the community in North Philadelphia, which is a community, disregarding the opposition of the community to build a stadium when their tuition rates keep going higher and higher and higher? And it's a state school. It's a state school. We see the same thing with Penn State. We see the same things going on with the state-funded schools that are 100% state-funded, like Shippensburg or Bloomsburg, whatnot. Why is this happening? Why did they go spend so much money building fancy dorms and whatnot, and then not being able to meet their obligations, and only to sit back and raise student tuition higher and higher? So we really need to investigate that at a federal level and to hold states accountable to what they're doing there. From a federal perspective, of course, we can sit back and offer more grants instead of loans. I think we need to get away from the whole student loans. We really need to provide grants. Another thing we need to do is to be creative at the high school level. Not all schools are offering dual enrollment. You know, by the time a kid hits their junior and senior year, they should be taking college level courses. There's no reason they should not have that opportunity. Some really great schools in Philadelphia and around the state of Pennsylvania are doing that. And so between that and AP classes, I think that can help alleviate the cost of colleges. Another thing that we need to look at is community college, free community colleges. Another thing, and this is again, my one of the reasons I ran, was the lack of pushing or telling the community about some of the benefits that the American Rescue Plan and the CARE Act did. And so I wrote this down. The American CARE Act had an amendment to the section 127 of the IRS code that allowed employers to pay off part of your student loan debt. It gained almost no traction in terms of Democrats talking about that. This was a bipartisan amendment. We need to, when things like this happen, that positively affect the lives of Pennsylvanians, we need to be talking about that. So I would sit back and take a look at the tax code as well and make sure that tuition and expenses are 100% deductible. You know, if corporations, if a CEO can sit back and deduct the cost of an airplane, Why can't a parent deduct the cost of a child's education? We need to, at the employer level and for small businesses, give tax credits so that companies can help pay for college education and that families can help pay for college education. Another thing that I have on my website, I'm one of the few that talk about some of these different ways we can do this. If you've paid off your student loans, God bless you, that's awesome. We give 100% refundable tax credits towards repayments of principal and interest. So I think that's some of the ways in which we can sit back and utilize the tax code for the local, for communities, for local people, for everyday people. We can sit back also and cap interest rates. There's no reason why now a student loan and parent plus interest rate loans are at 8, 9%, 10%. So these are really, really important issues that I think that if we implement them and extend them, they can really help reduce the cost of college education. But I think we need to join the rest of the Western world, and I should tell you, other, not so Western world, in helping pay for college education. I would like to see, we have to, a big complaint people have is some kids aren't serious about college, right? And so, or trade school, because that should be in there. We need to sit back and make sure that there is some skin in the game. So I would like to see some volunteerism. I'd like to see, if you join the military, that you don't pay any student loans. Another thing I want to think is very important for student loans is the military. I want to make sure that courses that people in the military take are transferable. Any certifications that they take nationwide are transferable at the state level and at the federal government. There's no reason someone who's taking courses through the military are told, oh, no, you've got to start all over again. And that is where we have to sit back and beef up the courses offered through the military, make sure, and in fact, you can see this at the community college level in Pennsylvania, whether you go to Montgomery County Community College or Philadelphia or Delaware Community College, they'll sit back and say, okay, here's our courses, and they're equivalent to these courses at these major universities. I want to see that from the United States military. I want to make sure, same thing with certifications. They should be able and must be transferable. In Pennsylvania, I should tell you, I was part of the Rural Health Task Force. One of the main beats with the task force, it was rejected. I brought an idea from Virginia. My nephew is in the United States military. He serves in the Navy Reserve. He was part of the COVID relief. And prior to that, he was part of a unit that went around the rural areas. In Kentucky, he went to, I believe, and in New York, where they provided health care. All right. So I said, these are great. I mean, here he is. He has these certifications in Virginia. They're transferable, and that you could work as an EMT with those credentials. In Pennsylvania, you couldn't do that. It was rejected. We need to do better so that someone who leaves the military is not now, in addition to having some student loan burden, is told, oh, well, all that you've done really doesn't transfer unless you become a prison guard or a policeman. We need to do better than what we're doing across the board with education. Same thing with trade schools. We need to make sure that the unions have apprenticeships, et cetera. So thank you.
Okay. Our second question. Our second question is, what can the federal government do to drive drug prices down? And would you push for a national single-payer healthcare system?
First, I'm going to go to the single healthcare payer system. I support Medicare for all. And the reason why I support Medicare for all, but I support the Australian plan, is because of where we are today. I believe your generation will be going single payer. By the time your generation gets around to it, we will have single payer. But where we are today, especially in Pennsylvania, because this is really important, this is about Pennsylvania, 40% of Pennsylvanians who are on Medicare use the Medicare Advantage. They like it. Now, I believe, as the Senator Sanders and others, that you need to sit back and raise benefits in terms of no co-pays and deductibles. I think that needs to happen across the board. needs to include dental, eye, glasses, hearing aids, etc. But psychologically, where we are today, psychologically, generationally, unfortunately, people just do not want a single payer today. But I believe very strongly that if we open up Medicare for everyone, starting at birth, we're ready because we have chips, so it's sort of there. But we open it up to everyone, and keep the private. We have private and public side by side, like what they have in Australia. In the end, people will choose. I truly believe will choose the government plan. But you don't know. In Australia, it's a 50-50 thing. To me, I think that's very important. That we have to take people where they are. So that's number one. Number two, so I will, to my point is, yes, I will introduce, but I will sit back and make sure that, we have both side by side. Number two, we must do something to reduce the cost of prescription drugs. As I told everyone, I was in Clarion County. I was the only candidate to go to Clarion County at this parade. And so I went around talking to people, and this woman first said to me, how about getting rid of these masks for our kids? And I told her, I said, look, miss, we have to work together. And I was respectful to her, and she was respectful to me. And then she said, can you do something about prescription drug costs? Now, I want to tell you, she was talking amongst her neighbors. This woman humbled herself and said this in front of her neighbors. My doctor gave me a prescription for inhaler. I didn't have the money. This is a woman who had small children. I didn't have money for the prescription, so I decided to go without. I feel an obligation to speak for her, right? I was sent to speak to her. That's how I view things. Fate sent me to meet her and to talk to her. And so I'm here to speak for her and to say that I will negotiate prescription drug costs. I do not think it will affect the profits of the pharmaceutical industry. I think they're doing quite well. It's a great industry. I should tell you, just in transparency, I work in the industry. I'm very proud of the work I do in the industry. I'm proud of my colleagues. I'm proud to work to make the lives of all people better and healthy. And I don't want to say we can sit back and negotiate insulin, make sure it caps at $35 or less. Make sure that people who have high blood pressure, arthritis, and other these ailments, do not make them choose between their medicines and their food and housing. So I think that's very important. I believe that we need to do what the Germans have done, the Brits have done, the Canadians have done, and sit back and cap prices, especially on these very life-saving medicines that people need every day. And, we can do better. We must do better.
Great. Thank you very much, Alex, for your responses. And thank you so much to the Youth Caucus for sharing those questions. It looks like we could maybe have time for one audience question, if there's something from your end, Kimberly.
Hi, Councillor Khalil. Thank you so much for joining us. I do have an audience question for you. Considering the spike in homicide rates across the United States affecting the safety of our family and friends at home, what plans do you have to keep Pennsylvania communities safe?
Great question, because we can have criminal justice reform and fight crime. So one of the reasons that we have the issues that we have is that we're seeing desperation, and we're seeing lack of hope in the future, lack of opportunities, which is why I say support Build Back Better, about bringing manufacturing jobs and job training back to Pennsylvania, so whether it's in the city of Philadelphia or in other communities. It's about bringing jobs back to communities. So that's one. We need to focus on mental health. Young people are, whether they're going out and getting shot up, or whether they're committing suicide. I mean, we seem to have had a rash of suicides in Chester County, in Downingtown. We have shootings in Philadelphia of young people who are age 15. Hello? Oh, so is that me or you guys? Hi, is that you or me? I'm sorry.
I think that might have been on your end.
Oh, wow, that's weird. So I'm so sorry. So in addition to that, we need to sit back and bring back community policing. We need the police to develop a relationship with the community. That's very important. We need to also sit back and do something about these straw purchases, these shadow purchases where, you know, the guns are sold illegally. I mean, how does a 14-year-old get a gun with the ammunition on top of that? Well, how do they go out and get that unless it's done illegally? So we really need to focus on the illegal trade of guns, the illegal acquisition of guns. We need to hold people accountable to put locks on their guns, to make sure that their guns are stored, that they report if a gun is missing. And above all else, you know, we really need to bring community together. I don't have all the answers. I would go to houses of worship, and non-houses of worship. Well, you know, not everyone goes to houses of worship, and get the community together, schools, you name it. We have to rebuild our community centers. You know, they're underfunded. We need to bring those all together. We need to bring everyone to the table and say, what can we do? And we have to do like yesterday. What is a shame is that what we're talking about now we should never be where we are today. Where we are today is due to desperation and people losing hope for today and tomorrow. We need people to feel that America is for them today and tomorrow, that your children and your grandparents and your parents have a place and you will thrive in Pennsylvania and in the United States. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you very much, Alex. Thanks for joining us and taking the time to share your views and your vision for the state of Pennsylvania. And yeah, with that, we'll hand it over to Kimberly to close us out.
It's an honor. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse. Thanks to Councillor Khalil. Thank you to everyone who joined us on the call today. Please remember that you and all U.S. citizens abroad can register to vote and request your ballots at www.votefromabroad.org. That's votefromabroad.org. If you've already received yours, please send it back by postal mail as soon as possible. It must be postmarked by May 16th and received by 5 p.m. on May 24th. Please refer to our detailed voting guide and ballot return instructions for more information. And again, the Pennsylvania State team will be sending out resources all along this midterm election cycle. I hope you've all enjoyed this discussion as much as I have. And if you would like to get in touch with our team, and if you'd like to volunteer with our team, please send us an email at pa@democratsabroad.org. That's pa@democratsabroad.org. And I would like to toss it back over to Candace, our fearless leader, to take us home.
Right. Well, thank you, Kimberly. And I would just like to say, please join me in giving a huge round of applause to our Pennsylvania State team for organizing all of this, pulling in 4 phenomenal candidates. I know it's a very difficult decision for all of us Pennsylvanians out there moving forward. It's been a really helpful event just to hear the candidates on these issues and also get to see them in real time and learn a little bit more about their personality and approach to politics more largely. So thank you to everyone involved with organizing today's events. I think very beneficial to all of us making informed decisions moving forward. Excuse me, there is a recording that's going to be immediately available. That is on our Facebook page, which is facebook.com/Dems Abroad, excuse me, just /Dems Abroad. You can find us and today's recording there, and it'll also be distributed to all Pennsylvania members of Democrats Abroad following today's event. I really do, again, just want to emphasize a huge thank you to all of you for taking the time to listen in and really make an informed decision about which Democrat you would like to see in office. you may have heard me say this before, but anytime we send out an email, and by the way, those are from real people with Dems Abroad, anytime we send those out, we get responses back saying, well, I think that the Democratic Party is too centrist, or I think it's too far to the left. And just this, breadth of Democrats that we have out there. But I think that is the beauty of the primary election cycle, is that this is really in your hands. The future of the party, the type of candidates, the types of Democrats that you would like to see in office, that's up to you now. So as Kimberly mentioned, again, make sure you get that ballot back postmarked by May 16th and that it is returned by May 24th at 5 p.m. So a few more quick words. As I mentioned before, everything that we do as an organization is on a volunteer basis. It is on a donation basis, but we have heard from each and every one of the candidates how critical our votes from abroad are going to be in November. And I have to say too, Democrats Abroad is the only organization out there doing this important work and this important outreach to overseas voters. There is no one else in the Democratic Party. There's no campaign. There is no state party. There is no national party that is doing this methodical outreach to overseas voters. That is our unique role in the Democratic Party, and we would be incredibly grateful for your support moving forward. If you are able to make a donation of $10, $20 or more, that would help us go a really long ways. A $10 donation is going to make sure that we can call at least 20 Pennsylvania voters who are living overseas, and that should not be underestimated as we approach November. So if you are able to make a donation, that would be greatly appreciated. democratsabroad.org/donate. And we're also looking for volunteers. We have phone banking campaigns running right now to Pennsylvania, as well as Georgia and North Carolina, two other battleground states. And we would appreciate your involvement in those. It's also democratsabroad.org/phone banking training. So we look forward to working with you throughout this year. Again, think about who you can reach out to, who you can share this recording with, and make sure that we are firing up Pennsylvanians all around the world. So on that note, thank you so much for joining. Looking forward to working with you throughout the year to make sure that we turn this Senate seat blue in Pennsylvania. Thanks everyone, and have a great rest of your Saturday.